As we enter the festive season, mega orderers, you may have forgotten just how much happened this year.
Zelensky in the White House, upbraided by JD Vance for not saying thank you, and the whole thing finishing with Trump overheard saying, "This will be great TV."
He comes out with that plastic board with the tariff numbers, and then the markets absolutely tank. The idea that no one knew what he was going to say. This is really the essence of disorder. But between the chaos, some true orderers stood out among the rest, and they give us some minuscule reasons to stay hopeful about 2026.
Anybody who can sustain being in a room with Prince Harry, Donald Trump, getting cancer treatment, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and keeping the show on the road.
His election showcases the country who is able to go elbows up and push back, and that people transcended their views to unite around him and to assert their sovereignty.
I would not have expected figures that I would have seen as conservative and very patriarchal roles to be actually reassuring because they have that weight and that history.
But though we're all hoping for a more orderly year ahead, can we really expect that from 2026? No, you'd have to be crazy.
Argentina or Spain will win the Football World Cup. Think of it, Lionel Messi versus Lamine Yamal.
The Epstein story is not going to go away in 2026. It's going to be bigger and bigger. We are going to find what people thought was just a sex scandal is much, much, much more than a sex scandal.
I don't think Keir Starmer will be the Prime Minister in a year. I think that the local elections probably will go badly for Labour, and that will incentivise a leadership change.
So to look back on this year's chaos and ask what might come next, let's order this disorder. I'm Jason Pack.
And I'm Jane Kinnenmont.
And I'm Mark Lobel.
And this is Disorder, the Christmas edition.
A podcast where we try to find order in our mad, but occasionally festive and merry world.
This week, we look forward to what we hope will be a very orderly Christmas for our mega orderers around the world.
So, mega orderers, we hope you are going to enjoy a little festive jingle that our friends at Evoke Choir have recorded for us. It was not an excellent start to the holiday season, given the attack on the first night of Hanukkah in Australia, which we would be remiss if we did not mention in this show. So we're going to come back to that horrific attack and its implications. But first, we believe as disorderly as the world is, as much chaos as there is from the economy, tariffs, the stock market, AI, is there any future to the world? We need to realize that the next generation are innocent and pure, like the baby Jesus. They are the future. They bring not just joy, but hope. We don't know what actions we're going to do, like generosity to a child, teaching someone something, donating to charity, which may magically lead to the salvation of all humanity. So with this spirit of hope, Jane, tell us, what are your plans? How are you commemorating this very important moment where in 32 BC or 0 AD or whatever, the baby Jesus was born?
Well, I'm quite a traditionalist about Christmas. I like to take a proper unplugging break. I like to connect with my family. I like to be near or close to home. I have spent Christmas in Australia multiple times, but it's frankly weird. I like doing the classic Northern European Christmas. And as well as loving Christmas, I also like the tradition of Yule. I think there's a very deep, although simple, reason why in Northern Europe, people long before Christianity came here got together, decorated their houses, drank a lot of alcohol, feasted, and put candles everywhere, because it is a time of year that normal life is a struggle. The hours of light are very, very short, and so there's a need to be festive and connect with people, basically to cheer everybody up, but also to have that sense that the nights are getting longer and harder, but there will be a turning point. So that's maybe a good thing for us to kind of hold on to, like politically as well. That sort of this too shall pass in terms of the winter is coming vibes that we have. I did enjoy going to a Christmas service in my local church, lured there partly by the promise of getting to meet donkeys. That was actually the first place that I had heard the news of the Bondi shooting, because there was a moment of silence for that. It was interesting also to go through this kind of nativity service and think about the resonance of this story where all this hope is put on a small baby, and you have, the idea of these wise men coming and falling on their knees before a small baby. How about you? What festive treats and traditions has this holiday got in store for you?
That you is you, Mark.
For me, Christmas, what's magical about Christmas is whatever your religion, it really is something that you can enjoy. We've managed to already go to a very lovely carol service. The kids have already seen reindeer, to pick up from your theme there, Jane.
Oh, mate, I only got donkeys. Where did you see these reindeer?
Reindeer and Kensal Rise. I don't know
North
how
London
they got here.
Fancy.
Exactly. And we go for the full-on traditional Christmas lunch, the game of Monopoly where everybody falls out. And a big surprise this year, recommended by a friend, and our kids don't know yet, but we're actually going to have a Christmas piñata.
Yay!
The only decision we had to make, the big decision in our commercial Christmas, if you like, a bit less worthy than yours, Jane, is what to fill it with. We had a choice of
sweets.
Sweets. Love hearts,
just sweets,
love hearts, roses, Quality Street, or celebrations. And I wonder what you and Jason would have gone for out of those four.
Well, it's not Valentine's Day; it's Christmas.
So not love hearts.
I mean, roses are an absolute Christmas classic, and Quality Street have been ruined for me because for some reason I have this association in my head that they're Saddam Hussein's favourite sweet. I don't even know if that is true. But I cannot eat Quality Street without thinking about that, So
we have opted for Saddam Hussein's favourite sweet, but just because it's got very colourful wrapping, and I'd imagine it falling out with the kids in front of the kids once they've bashed it open. So yeah, and we don't have the staying power to wait for that turning point, Jane. So we will also, just after Boxing Day, be dashing for some sun, and I've got to say, it has led to a new lesson in life for me, and it's perhaps unexpectedly, where I've been talking to a shark expert who is actually a close friend of mine about how to handle sharks if you come face to face. Because ever since we booked our tickets to the Red Sea, I have now become paranoid that we are going to be attacked by sharks. So it's going to be hopefully orderly. Hopefully orderly. But one tip I give you both about sharks, perhaps unexpectedly, is that you should never lose eye contact. Never take your eyes off them if you're face to face with a shark. They can't ambush you. It shows how confident you are. It shows they're being watched, and it'll throw them off your scent, apparently.
Oh, you'll be fine then. And I have just fact checked Saddam Hussein and Quality Street, and apparently he did offer Quality Street when George Galloway went to visit him. And George Galloway subsequently spoke about how they bonded over the shiny chocolate. So there's a lovely festive tale for you.
I kind of feel it's
your piñata. Sorry,
I don't know. I kind of feel it adds to its legitimacy.
Is it candy?
Quality little wrapped chocolates, and they have different flavors. Some might be filled with different fillings than others.
That is the dumbest name for a candy. It sounds like either it's a street, or I thought it was a music group.
It's based on the play by James Barrie called Quality Street, and it was more famous than Peter Pan, apparently. We're just looking this up as we speak. As you say, fact-checking. It was a Broadway production.
Yeah, live
so it was originally in America.
Now on Wikipedia.
It was originally in America, Jason. Opened in 1901 on Broadway.
Is it going to be the purple ones that are going to come out, you think?
Oh, if you're lucky.
Or the round gold toffee ones, or the triangular green ones that have kind of nougat in them. You need to discover this, Jason. But tell us more about your holiday plans, and perhaps include in that what the important candy is for you.
This is a very, very good question. I don't really like candy.
What?
It's not just that it's too sweet, it sticks in your teeth. I really hate that feeling. What I do like are good dark chocolate. Like, I have hosted a few things recently, and as a result, I've been given chocolate and pistachio or little cute designer chocolates that need to stay in the fridge because they have like molten centers. So those things are all fantastic. What am I up to? I have by tradition gone back to the United States for this time of year, either to New Jersey or to Colorado. Since my knee injury, dear mega orderers, I really try to avoid going to Colorado because just sitting in my folks' apartment when they're off skiing and I'm in a tiny apartment and I can't do anything kind of sucks. It also,
Yeah, I see that.
It's exactly 3 years since I tore my ACL on December 15th, 2022. Ooh. So this would not be the time of year that I would like to be out there. Because I am on my pitch count, I only have a certain number of days out that I can be from the UK. So I am going to be doing the holiday season here entirely. And I'm really, really grateful that I had so many invites. I was at a absolutely fantastic black tie Christmas past hors d'oeuvres catered affair from a Russi fellow that we have had on the podcast. I don't want to name her or him, but one of our intrinsic mega orderers, and that was very, very cheerful. I have another black tie, but this is a birthday party tomorrow. And then like a Christmas charity, James Bond themed black tie party.
Man,
And
you have a lot more black tie things in 2 weeks
That
than I've
bow
had
tie
in
is
10
going to
years.
get, and
no,
for
I'm not
people
wearing
who
this one.
can't
I have
see,
a actual black one.
for people who can't see, Jason is wearing a beautiful Christmassy red bow tie, which Jane and I got the pleasure of watching you tie, which was looking very strong. A little bit of a middle kind of hurdle that you hit, and then you just suddenly pulled it out of
Those
the
were all
park.
tentatives. It took me multiple tentatives because I don't have a mirror. I'm actually looking out at a window, guys. Ergo, I was like missing the getting the.
Oh, then you did a
hole.
good job.
Yeah, I have my window behind the computer. What else do I have on? I went to friends' parents for Christmas last year, and this year I'm going to an ex-girlfriend's sister. And I'm really looking forward to it because it will be a different iteration of the classically British Christmas. I have also commissioned festive, special backgammon Christmas cards. I'm really proud of these. They're like red and green quilted backgammon scenes in Christmas card form. So these are the things that I have on.
I did have a chance to be in Montreux recently for a conference, and I enjoyed going to the Christmas markets there, where they have mulled wine and also a weird new invention, which is the fondue sandwich, which I'm frankly not sure about. I didn't actually try the fondue sandwich. I had raclette, where you get the potatoes and they put melted cheese over it, and you're just allowed to eat potatoes and melted cheese and drink wine as though that was like a reasonable meal, and it's amazing. But they have this thing now with a baguette with fondue in it that you can carry around and
Presumably,
eat as you do your shopping.
Presumably that ruins the ratio of bread to cheese, which is what you enjoy with proper fondue.
I think it's really contentious, so I think even for us, these may be too toxic, these debates, and we should just stick to politics. Donald Trump, easy issues like that.
So, reflecting on the amount of cheese-filled disorder that we have had in 2025, you have to love the cheesiness of my humor and transitions.
Oh, yes. I fondue.
I want to ask you,
very
to
good,
your
Jane.
minds, what was the biggest moment of disorder in the year? Maybe something we haven't spoken about. What was a real pivotal moment? Mark, top disordered moment of 2025.
If we're going to get very serious all of a sudden, Jason, I feel that there was a theme, which was the disorder of the violent disorder in the world, and I wouldn't be able to pick one. And I would look across the civil war in Sudan. It's now 13 million displaced there. The thing that struck me in Syria this year was really what has been termed the massacre in March, the coastal violence against Alawites there, which a lot of us in the UK were able to hear about firsthand through people who had contacts there, and the kind of disorder that suddenly struck that community of Syrian, mainly Alawites, were the primary targets there. It goes without saying, the bombing and attacks on Gaza, the flooding, the winter storms that continue, and the Manchester and Sydney attacks on the Jewish community. All of that, I think, unfortunately...
And Charlie Kirk's death, all part of the politicization of violence.
Absolutely. That was the negative. There was one craze that took the world, if you want to lighten the mood for a second, and this was the 6/7 craze. I still don't understand it, but it got right to the top of the UK government. Sir Keir Starmer's greatest PR moment, when he created disorder in the classroom, and it just involves the numbers 6 and 7 in that order, and that's all I can say about it. Everything else is just the way, however you want to take it.
The greatest disorder of 2025.
6/7. So clearly the wars in the world that you've just been talking about have been the most extreme kind of manifestations of disorder. If I'm going to pick one moment which is really visual as well for all of us, it is Zelensky in the White House finding himself coming from the war zone to his ally for help, and then being mocked for his clothes and upbraided by JD Vance for not saying thank you, and the whole thing finishing with Trump overheard saying, "This will be great TV." I think that it sums up something that is going on in politics, where politics is, including especially the Trump administration, is incredibly performative. It is about these optics that are so divorced from the sort of pain and suffering that they are causing in reality. But it also was, I think, a kind of deliberately staged by the US moment. I don't mean that Zelensky was staging it. I mean, I think this was a deliberate sort of performance to send a very strong message to Europe, which has been one of the key changes in the world over this year. It started with Vance at the Munich Security Conference. It's continued with the recent publication of the National Security Strategy, where the transatlantic relationship is changing in a really deep way. That is playing out in a disorderly fashion as well, because European leaders are struggling over how to react to it. And of course, we have talked about this on the show. And I remember, Jason, when we did our first event at RUSI, that we had a debate, you had a debate there, particularly with Neil Melvin, about, can we think about UK security independently of the US? And there was a feeling in those sort of security circles at RUSI that we can't. It's unthinkable. But now it is what people are having to think about. We've just heard the Armed Forces Minister saying that we have to think about what defence looks like without the US. But everyone is thinking about it too slowly, because the disordering change is happening too fast and people have not been prepared. So there's something in here as well about order, which is going to require high-speed mental agility and adaptation to change when some of your foundational assumptions about how the world works turn out not to be true anymore.
Well, my disorder moments of the year are to bring in the economic aspect, and particularly the enduring disorder paradigm. Because when I established this concept back in 2019, and we started the podcast in 2023, I wanted to get at what's different about our current historic moment, that allies pull in opposite directions, and that major powers like the US and the UK undermine their own objectives and flip-flop back and forth without solving a challenge. And let's just talk about the economy. I'm not a believer in tariffs. I believe in free trade. However, the Chinese have manipulated the WTO, and there could be a case. I wouldn't agree with this case, but there could be a legitimate case for tariffs. You announce them, you say that they're going to last for 20 or more years, and you try to reshore some manufacturing jobs. The idea that no one knew what he was going to say, he comes out with that plastic board with the tariff numbers, and then the markets absolutely tank and the bond market is just in his face, and then he reverses and says a 90-day pause. And then at the end of the 90-day pause, he changes the tariffs. He makes another 90-day pause. The Chinese go from 30% to 120, 120 to 50. Then we have this agreement with Japan, and it's different from this one. This is really the essence of disorder. If we had certain goals, either about, creating manufacturing jobs in the US, or, for example, punishing China, okay, have a coherent tariff policy and follow through. We have to, though, admit that it's not just the Trump administration who's fucked up things like this. Rachel Reeves has known that there's been this fiscal black hole. She's known that there are problems in terms of the UK's tax base. But then they entirely contorted themselves with these manifesto pledges. And then she said, I'm going to break the manifesto pledge and increase income tax. And then she said, I'm not going to break the manifesto pledge. And then the budget is leaked. And we're talking about major world powers running about the most sophisticated economies in the globe. They can't have a coherent plan. So it's not about left and right. It's about the enduring disorder that some context that we're in, the combination of the media and the AI and whatever, get a grip. You got to control the messaging, and you got to be on message, unless you're just trying, like the Trumpians are, to disorder the global economy. What is my biggest moment of disorder over the course of 2025? It is the inability of the ordering world, other than some very small exceptions, which we're going to come to later, to get on the same page. As soon as Trump gave his April surprise, Starmer, or I think it was then Olaf Scholz and not Merz yet, or Macron should say, I'm having a big conference. Everyone is going to come. We, in the G6, have this response. This is the new free trade bloc that we have agreed. These are the democracy grants. These are the whatever. And instead, everyone went piecemeal, one by one, to Washington, negotiated side deals. And when the Europeans tried to act together, they were treated like school children. And yes, you could say on the defense front, going back to what you mentioned, Jane, Europeans have boosted defense spending and they are creating an alternative, but only as a last resort when forced. They have just absolutely been prostrate, letting events overtake them and then reacting. And Gaza is an example. Where is the European or other democracy attempt to make its own leadership over the Gaza issue, or over the Sudanese civil war, or over the known revenge killings that were going to happen to Alawites and Ismailis and Druze in Syria? We have to mention the Druze there, Mark. A lot of the other minority communities have also suffered retributive violence. So, yeah, the biggest disorder is the failure to coordinate among these few powers who say that they care about global order. Next, now we're going to pivot. Those are the disorders of the year. What is a dimension of order over 2025 that has really surprised you? And who would you like to anoint as your orderer of the year? Ladies first.
Okay, so where has there been order? It's very much a glass half full. It's not an amazing thing. But actually, the COP climate conference, riddled with problems as it was, including an actual fire in the conference, it could have been a lot worse. Given that you have a US administration that says man-made climate change is a con, you had every other country in the world come together and reaffirm they believe the scientific evidence that man-made climate change is real and it's happening, and they maintained the goal of keeping global warming to 1.5. Every year, everybody says COP is a huge disappointment. This year, Brazil set really ambitious targets to work on a transition away from fossil fuels and a plan to stop deforestation, which is really important because you also need those forests to absorb carbon. And compared with those ambitions, the conference did not manage to reach plans that were agreed by everybody. But they did get about half the countries in the world signing up to ambitious plans and a consensus on at least the basics. Some diplomats say it's actually a blessing that the US completely opted out, because had it been there, they might well have worked with Russia and Saudi Arabia to try to water down the targets and mess with the consensus. So I think that was actually something quite positive, not that we can be complacent about how fast the world is moving. In terms of who's the order of the year, frankly, I am not giving that prize this year. I just cannot really see anyone that has done a fantastic job in bringing order. What I do see is leaders who have sometimes done something really positive and played an interesting role, but are also really lacking in other ways. So if we look at the Middle East and, why hasn't Europe done more on Gaza? I would say that France and Norway, working with Saudi Arabia, have been hugely active. They have been stymied to a large extent by the US because they have been working for a Palestinian state, which the US and obviously Israel have not endorsed. But I think that France and Saudi Arabia, Norway working in partnership together and getting the Europeans and the Arab League to build up a consensus about a transition for Gaza and moving beyond Hamas and trying to reinstall a Palestinian post-Hamas leadership, I think that's really significant and interesting and important. However, I cannot say MBS and Macron are the orderers of the year, because they have also so many, in different ways, problems in terms of how they run their own very different countries.
Jane, can I ask you a question about the climate? From all the face-to-face meetings that you've had, because you've really been at the centre of it this year, what is the deal with fossil fuels? Are they just back on the agenda? Have electric vehicles been sidelined? Because that's what we seem to be presented with.
So one of the really lame things about COP was that the closing statement actually took out the word fossil fuels. You know how diplomats spend their whole time discussing certain words that suddenly somebody wants to take out, and countries like Saudi Arabia said we really don't like you calling these fuels fossil fuels, very offensive, etc. You have got about half of the world now saying we have to get rid of these fuels altogether. And we have other parts of the world, mainly the producers, saying, we have to have a chance to use these assets. We don't want these assets to become stranded. You want the transition to move too fast. And this has been going on at recent COPs, hosted by big fossil fuel countries like Azerbaijan and UAE as well. So it's one of the areas of contestation. But I think that Europe is not backsliding as much as I had feared. So that's why I say it's glass half full. I just was worried that short-termist politicians would be thinking, let's give up on this stuff because voters have forgotten about it and we're not really having the protests and we've got to shore up growth really quickly. But I think actually the wider business world is quite on board with moving towards a more green economy.
Order of the year, Mark.
So you asked for a surprise moment of order first, and I think, playing devil's advocate, if I was Jason Unpack writing the alternative book to the one that you wrote, I'd say we had a great moment, everybody. President Xi, Putin and Kim Jong-un signaled a push for a new world order in September, and since then they have delivered on their promises, and we have seen military and diplomatic alliances between the three countries, and they're finally ordering their part of the world, and they're getting on and doing it. And they may even find a way to keep themselves alive for another 50 or 60 or 70 years as well, as they were caught on hot mic saying. So I think that would be my moment of order if I was Jason Unpack, because while Donald Trump and the West are not, acting together in the ways that you've outlined, Jason, other people are getting on with it. India as well, South Africa, that people are making their own plans, which is, of course, something that was predicted in your book as well. So maybe the two books combined there. As for the order of the year, I'm going to opt for King Charles, because anybody who can sustain being in a room with Prince Harry, Donald Trump, getting cancer treatment, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, having family, foreign dignitaries, and your own personal medical challenges, and come out smiling and look like you're winning and keeping the show on the road. I think that from an ordering point of view, with slim pickings, Jane wasn't able to pick one, I think he's probably a safe choice.
I'd like to raise a glass to the king. Whenever I have my dry sherry before the meal, I wish to commemorate His Majesty by raising my glass. You're onto something, which is that monarchy and traditional structures in general are going to be lowercase c conservative and try to say, hey, this is how we've done things. There's something to be said for this. And this is why I am happily to be ensconced here in these aisles. I think that much is falling apart, but King Charles has always been, to my mind, a forward-thinking guy. Like, it's not just the environment. He always gets credit for the environment, but organic farming and seeing how the generations were changing and other stuff, he's a bright guy. I will anonymously say I was in a room with a former British ambassador who said of him, he knows all the names of all the ancestors of the Gulfi monarchs, the names of their horses, the names of their horses that won at Ascot, the names of their falcons and the falcons that they were their prized falcons. And you may say, well, he's just a toff. And I'm like, no, this is a bright man who clearly understands how the social and political worlds are connected. I'd almost like him to have a greater role in trying to say, psst, Keir, we have these climate goals. I thought that we talked about this. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just want us to not invite Trump to this thing, but push on that. Mm-hmm, so I'd be very happy to see him be more involved.
And isn't it interesting? Like, I would never have thought in my 20s that I might sit on a podcast in my 40s and say sort of here for the king and maybe also the Pope, as the people who seem to be calm. I would not have expected figures that I would have seen as conservative and very patriarchal roles to be actually people that are reassuring, even to some young people, because they have that weight and that history, and they seem somewhat less mad than politicians, and as people are really running out of politicians to trust or respect, so they look elsewhere for people that seem to have a different role.
Continuity thrives in the chaos.
That's right. We have also the first woman Archbishop of Canterbury, so that's going to be an interesting British leader to look at in the year ahead. I think so far we don't know too much about what she's going to bring to that, but I think that's another traditional role that has quite a lot of possibility.
For me, the mega orderer of the year is clear. It's Mark Carney, because his election showcases the country who is able to go elbows up and push back, and that people transcended their views about liberal and conservative in the Canadian sense to unite around him and to assert their sovereignty and to figure out the new ways of working with allies. For more on Mark Carney, we're going to put a link in the show notes to our episode with Marcy Sirks, who was the top kind of chief of staff figure for Justin Trudeau. And she's someone who really knows how Canadian politics works. She was running the Prime Minister's office. So, yeah, Carney is the orderer of the year. In terms of an event or an ordering process, I'm going to say European rearmament. It's happening behind the scenes. It isn't going to snap into gear immediately. But by 2027 or 2028, it is not unreasonable that the German army will be, able to take the field and can, in its production capacity, supply Ukraine in ways that it cannot now. So that's like a pretty big deal. It's a slower change, but it is in the process of happening, and we should laud it. And the Ukrainians are part of that. Their drone capacities and their ability to, use the old adage that necessity is the mother of invention. The Ukrainians have faced extreme necessity, and now they have really used that to invent. There's been a lot of disorder in 2025, but one thing that we have not discussed much of is the disorder that is coming down the pike in 2026. I postulate that the Epstein revelations are going to be very, very profound, and that we are going to find that what people thought was just a sex scandal is much, much, much more than a sex scandal. The sex ring and the lurid and immoral grooming of women is horrific, but the geopolitical implications of what Epstein shows are that there were people who were meeting with Putin and the Mossad and American leaders, and there's a stratum of intelligence and resource companies and surveillance tech that are enmeshed. And this is, to me, very worrying because we're in a very conspiratorial age. How do you debunk the conspiracies when the news is coming out of something that is like a conspiracy? There is a real cover-up and a real conspiracy, and people just run with it. And then they say every little nuance off of this is also real, which it isn't necessarily. So my prediction for Epstein is that the Epstein story is not going to go away in 2026. It's going to be bigger and bigger, and that we're mostly going to be talking about the non-sex parts of Epstein, and that we're going to see even more conspiratorial thinking, politics, and Epstein will be driving the politics to the left and the right, to the Polanskian reform, to the Trumpian and Mamdanian wings. And this very, very much worries me as a centrist. So those are my predictions for 2026. Mark?
For 2026, I'm absolutely fixated on the elections that are coming up. And I don't know what I wouldn't like to predict what's going to happen, but I can predict that what happens is going to shape things dramatically. I'm thinking about the elections in Israel. I'm thinking about also the elections in Bangladesh related to the previous.
I'm thinking about the elections in Armenia.
You're thinking about the elections in Armenia. Also, the US and the UK have very important elections that will determine the strength of the current governments as well. I also want to know whether the AI bubble will burst. That's something that I'm watching very closely. And what most people will be focused on, I think, aside from all of these things, Jason and Jane, is the Football World Cup. And just a note on that.
No.
Just a note on that. The prediction is, and it's only we've only got 6 months to wait or so.
Scotland will win.
Argentina or Spain, Jane. Argentina or Spain will win the Football World Cup. Think of it, Lionel Messi versus Lamine Yamal, a 39-year-old against an 18-year-old. He's half his age, in the final on July the 19th at the New York, New Jersey MetLife Stadium. If they both win their groups, they can only meet in the final. Argentina-Spain final. And one of the two will win.
Wow, that is a very bold prediction. I didn't know that it was taking place in Jersey at MetLife Stadium. That's hysterical. I want to see how Donald Trump uses his FIFA Peace Prize because there are opportunities to use soccer to bring peace. I don't think Trump is doing that.
But he's trying to change the name from soccer to football in America.
With him. We've said before, he can be right about some things.
I mean, that one caught me by surprise.
It's association football. I mean, as you are probably well aware, this is an Eton slang from the 1880s. And a soccer, meaning an association soccer game. So that's why we say soccer. It's it's British to call it soccer. It's just 1880s British, right?
The real British. Make British names for football great again.
So,
Jason, you as a Christmas kind of cracker, bit of trivia, know how football used to be played, which shocked me.
yes.
Try and explain that in 1 minute to your disorderers.
There
Mega
are
orderers.
many books about the history of the 7 codes of football. I have read almost all of them. I'm happy to suggest some of the best books about football. The point being, what we call football in the Anglo world, meaning both American football, Australian rules football, association football, European football, rugby, all derived from the same game. These were games played at the famous 7 boarding schools in the UK, and they were beginning to be codified in the 1850s and 1860s. And this is a process that has to do with the old members, particularly old Etonians and old Harrovians, playing games of their variants of their school's football game when they were in London. And they all, in the ancient past, derive from the Shrovetide games, which were played in medieval English towns, particularly in the West Midlands, where from one town to another, they would compete in pushing a ball forward. These were no-hold-bars contests. You could punch, kick, elbow the opponent to advance the ball. If you advanced the ball to their village, you won. And if we go to the 1850s, like the Etonian football game was a game where you could never be in front of the ball. You just had to kick and run after, i.e. kick and chase, or dribble, and then if you get tackled, punch the guy and defeat him and then dribble past him. You could pass sideways or backwards. And all football games have a remnant of the initial views about offsides, either not being in front of the ball, which leads to the offside rule in...
Oh, it was called off his side.
Yes.
Just fact-checking you now.
Yes.
When you had to
So
keep behind the ball.
Apply it in women's football.
Yeah. And
good point.
in rugby, of course, the remnant of this, and rugby is the version of football which was played at the rugby school, the ball could be thrown with the hands, but not forward. So it derives from these same principles. The ball has to be lateraled and then carried forward. It's critical to point out that in the 19th century, that's how American football was played as well. There was no forward pass. If you join the Mega Orderers Club, listeners, and become a Mega Orderer, I will do something about the history of football and how Australian rules football and Canadian football all factor in here.
Well, I'm going to flag 2 things as I hurtle towards the open goal of 2026 and try to work out whether or not I'm offside, which I never will be able to work out. And both of the things that I want to flag are about leadership. I don't think Keir Starmer will be the Prime Minister in a year.
No way.
Now.
Wow, that's bold.
But I think that the Labour Party is going to be really struggling with this. I think that the MPs are now quite divided over, whether you just rally around the leader and try to make it work, or whether you decide this isn't working, he won't be the leader by the next election, so we might as well try to move sooner. We haven't really seen this in Labour politics in my lifetime. It has been more familiar from the Conservative Party that we've seen leaders be kind of stabbed in the back. But I think things are in a serious mess now. I think that the local elections probably will go badly for Labour, and that will then incentivise some kind of serious attempt at a leadership change. So that is going to be something that preoccupies British politics, but it may have bad effects by creating more insecurity and sort of uncertainty and indecision. Let's see. The other issue, which I've mentioned briefly before, but I will be obsessing over for probably the next 9 months, is the selection process for the next Secretary General of the UN. At this critical time for multilateralism, where you have many countries in the world that actually want a stronger UN and wants to push international law and get international courts dealing with things like climate change. But then, of course, you have the P5 and you have probably the main thing that Putin, Trump, and Xi can agree on, which is that the world should not be run in an orderly international law type of way, but that now is a good time to really assert the model of having spheres of influence where neo-imperial powers dominate and everyone else essentially shuts up and agrees with them. So, which crazy people are putting their name forward for this difficult job? I think there will be really good candidates, and they will mostly be declaring in the first quarter of 2026. So far, those that have declared are Rafael Grossi, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency. He has had to deal directly with Russia to get access to the Zaporizhia power plant, the Ukrainian nuclear plant that has been under Russian occupation and even Russian attack. He has had to deal with Iran, where the IAEA very technical reporting on Iran was used as something of a casus belli, very controversially, earlier this year. He's a very significant and interesting person. We also have Rebecca Greenspan from Costa Rica, who would be also quite popular with many countries because there is a strong view that it's time for a woman, and it's time for a woman from Latin America. She is the Secretary General of UNCTAD, the UN Conference on Trade and Development. So she comes really from an economics background, but she was also involved in negotiating the Black Sea grain deal that Russia and Ukraine signed up to with UN and Turkish mediation. And then there's Michelle Bachelet, former president of Chile, so again a woman from Latin America, who was the UN human rights chief and was the Chilean president, but she may not have the backing of the new government in Chile, so that could be difficult for her. We'll probably see another 8 to 10 really serious candidates declaring. So this is an interesting chance to have a big conversation about what kind of leadership you need from multilateralism. And, we will definitely come back to this next year. It's going to be a big focus for me in my day job. The first thing that I'm busy with in 2026 is going to be a big event on January the 17th in Methodist Central Hall in Westminster to mark the 80th anniversary of the first UN General Assembly, which was held there in 1946, when people's minds were quite focused by the fact they were meeting in this London where diplomats had to get ration cards because food was still scarce, and they were taken on tours of bombed out suburbs to see the effects of war. We will have a big event as the United Nations Association to mark that anniversary, and we will be hosting Antonio Guterres, the current UN Secretary General, here in London to give a keynote speech and talk about the history of the UN, also start to kickstart this conversation about how do we make it work better. The UN is, going through huge budget cuts. The British Foreign Office is going through huge budget cuts as well. This is generally bad, but we do need to focus on what are the priorities to preserve and really get working well, because there's going to be change thrust upon our government, there's going to be change thrust upon the UN. How do we harness that change in a way that actually solves problems and maybe starts to work more efficiently? So I think that one of the big things on the new Secretary General's agenda will be that actually almost everyone wants the UN to really reclaim a role in international peace and security through high-level mediation. Countries are going to disagree about what that should look like. But I think there is a real interest from many, including the US, in getting that functioning better. And that's another area that I'm really keen to talk about with you guys over the next year is, what can this body do that was actually formed to build peace? How can it do that more effectively? In this world with the growing numbers of conflicts that we see and the many, many countries and leaders who want to be seen as the best peacemakers.
Jane has proposed some ways in which the UN can help order the disorder. So let's try to focus on other non-UN things. This is the rapid fire Christmas round. Where was the hope this year, Mark?
The thing that struck me this Christmas and is gaining momentum is the juxtaposition between Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, and Christmas, and where it asks us to be thankful for things and where it gets us to focus on being thankful for things. And I think that, for me, is a wonderful thing. I mean, Thanksgiving's become a big thing, hasn't it, at your house, Jason? I interviewed recently on the BBC the general manager of a high-class restaurant where his menu sold out in record time, offering a Thanksgiving dinner. We were sat around a table with the kids at a friend's Thanksgiving party, and they were asked what they were thankful for. And even at a young age, they can appreciate things like their friends, being thankful for their life, for good health. And, I went as far as saying I was thankful for things like electric bike rentals. I mean, they're a game changer on the daily commute. I won't name any brands. But, there's a serious point, is this time of year gives us a chance to reflect on what we're thankful for. And it does bring out the best in humanity when you think about it like that, and you think about how similar we all are. I reflect on a conversation I just had with a friend recently when I was feeling the heat from all these attacks in the world on the Jewish community, and many other communities, of course, are being attacked in high-profile ways. And how does somebody get out of that mentality? Really just by talking to somebody, and that there's a lot that brings us together. And we can really, the second you look at social media, you lose hope. And off the back of the attack on the Jewish community in Australia, I must say, and I've seen a lot, and we've all seen a lot, I was shocked by the reaction on social media and the politicization and the kind of downright shocking response from people, and for some reason it came together in my algorithm, and it takes away from the fact of what has happened and trying to digest what has happened and trying to work through a tragedy, and it completely diverts attention. So I think the hope is coming from a time like this where we can focus on what we're thankful for. We can focus on conversations with friends and family, and that's what I think we need hope from.
Reasserting the human element. I agree that the human element is critical. I realized that we had said in the main part of the show we were going to talk about the Bondi attack. I am going to teaser the listeners with my theory that we have moved from the global war on terror in the post 9/11 era to a post October 7th global war on Jews, and that sadly this dynamic is not going anywhere. What do I mean by that? You're going to have to tune in. I'm going to be speaking about this topic on Arthur Snell's Behind the Lines podcast, and I've made a YouTube video. The link is in the show notes about what does it mean to go from the global war on terror to the global war on Jews. But the Jews are a mystical, conspiratorial thing in the minds of those who are attacking them. It's not about the concrete individual, but about upheaval and the polarization in our politics, the scapegoating. I mean, this is obviously the oldest hatred, the oldest way of thinking about things. Oh, there's a lot of inequality. Things are changing too quickly. Aha. The Jews are promoting the inequality. They're bringing in the migrants, great replacement, all of those things, let alone Gaza and the accusations of genocide. So I don't think that that's going to be getting better anytime soon. And I have been shocked to read about the responses in the Palestinian community towards the heroism of Syrian Ahmed al-Ahmed, who attacked and defeated the terrorist, took his gun away, and is a hero. You know what I mean? He's obviously a hero, but he's being attacked online, someone for whom he risked his life. And Prime Minister Albanese went and visited him. I'm going to put something in the show notes and Substack about the fact that we are in a place that we can't even agree. Is the sky up and the earth down? Is the sky blue and not red? This is where we're at when you hear how social media responds to things that should be very clear-cut, saving people's lives and confronting a terrorist. What could be a more feel-good story than that? And yet, social media manages to make up down and left into right.
But I think we need to remember as well that like some of the social platforms, especially X, like they are deliberately magnifying this stuff, and then it's magnified further by bots and trolls, and it's really distorting reality. So when we come to our places that we're looking for hope, I have two things to mention, but one of the things is I'm really interested in the people who are working on like trying to harness AI for good, and I would love to explore more who is trying to like reinvent social media and have social media platforms that are more benign. Because like yes, we should all be spending less time on social media. And actually, in many cases, usage is dropping, and schools and teenagers are actually like becoming more aware that these things are very damaging. They are learning something about that. Um, but we also just need an alternative to X, because X is run by somebody who is a known sympathizer with the far right. And as soon as he took over this platform, anti-Semitic content absolutely surged. So do think like something needs to be done, needs to be a good alternative, and probably Europeans need to look at things like, should MPs actually be using X as a primary platform, or should they be moving on and sort of not becoming content creators for that? And then the other thing is, Mark, you talked about sources of hope and gratitude close to home. And I think that's a reality for many people, that even as we don't trust our politicians, we do see people around us every day that are doing things on a small scale that really you just know in your local community. And I recently had the pleasure of hosting a group of about 15 women who were from an interfaith dialogue programme, who were in London for a day of working on civil society leadership. So I did an exercise with them where people got into pairs and identified who was a female leader that they looked up to, that they would regard as a role model, and why. And what I found really interesting was, with only one or two exceptions, they were all people that like I had never heard of, and most people had never heard of. It was a manager at work who put the staff above themselves. It was a friend's mother who always looked out for people. It was very local, very real. It probably is related to trust and a sense that people that we see in the media might not be believable, but that you want somebody that you actually know and you can see doing something tangible in your community. But those people are everywhere, and they can be sources of hope for everyone. So maybe also listeners can think about that, think about who comes to mind for you, and hopefully that is some kind of micro inspiration that is nice to take away with you as you feel warm and Christmassy as we come towards the end of our episode.
You're both onto something here, which is that the human element, the human interaction in Christmas and Thanksgiving is critical. You need to be face to face with the person. And what I'm going to say to the mega orderers is, do a random act of charity that you didn't anticipate doing. Oh, you have that cousin who is good at art, but her parents can't afford the art lessons. I'm going to give my second cousin these art lessons. It just occurred to me, that's my Christmas thing. Or I have found like, oh, you know what? I'm going to spend an hour or two of my time to help a friend's kid do their graduate school applications. So I'm going to say that I'm not naturally born the best at these things, but I'm going to try to push myself to do some more of these random acts of charity. We said this was going to be a lightning round, though, my co-hosts. We are not lightninging. So for the last three things here to close out our Christmas episode, please, lightning requires the message to land within a sentence or two. What is the one wish of order that you would like under the Christmas tree? Jane.
America, please calm down.
Mark.
My wish of order under the Christmas tree is for there to be a different choice in the Middle East. The Deputy Israeli Foreign Minister Shireen Haskell was saying it's only when we had no other choice that we chose military means. Well, whatever you think about that statement, there's been a conflation of Hamas and the Palestinians. There's been a conflation of the Jews and the Israeli government. Neither side is currently aiming for what we in the West see as a peaceful solution. So I describe it as a race to the bottom at the moment. It's depressing, it's ungenerous, it's inhumane. That's what I'd like. A different choice in the Middle East, which comes back to your point, Jane, about leadership and having those leaders that can offer that choice.
Amazing. My wish for order under the Christmas tree is an ordering social movement. That young people throughout the world can agree that they want to have a better future and that they can write, protest, vote, sing songs for solidarity on various topics, from climate change to universal basic income to whatever their things might be. Some kind of solidarity movement that we're all in it together. I am very thankful to have shared a lot of my 2025 with you, but I am more thankful for the mega orderers. If you too want to help order the disorder, please consider joining the Mega Orderers Club, but also gifting the Mega Orderers Club of ad-free listening, bonus content, and the chance to come to our live event on January 8th at Rusi, where Jane and I will be joined by Arthur Snell and Jonathan Ayal of Rusi to talk about all the risks and threats that 2026 holds for disorder. Please join the Mega Orderers Club.
Don't forget about our YouTube channel too. If you want to see these discussions, as well as the extra exclusive videos, then just subscribe. It's very easy. The link is in the show notes.
I have recently been in personal communication with Santa Claus, and he is accepting joining the Mega Orderers Club as a legitimate Christmas wish. So you may ask people around you for that as a Christmas gift, and what better gift could there be? Finally, for more on today's topics, we have a Substack too. The link is, you guessed it, it's right there in the show notes. Our producer is George McDonough. Happy Christmas, George. Thanks for everything. And Disorder is part of the seasonally named Evergreen Podcast Network.
Thank you for listening. Hope you have an orderly Christmas. And now to Jingle Bells by Evoke.